sustainability, and I focus on dairy cows on pasture. I didn't look at Jude's presentation, although I follow you on the media. I'm 61 years old, but I follow you, don't worry. But you know, often I think I'm so glad that we can talk about the consumer. You're very nice with the consumer, Jude. But you know, they tell us that gluten is bad, and hormones are bad, and antibiotics are bad, and GMO is bad, and fat is also bad, it gives you cancer, and organic is good, and low carbohydrate is also good. And if we really subscribe to all that, what we will have on our plate is exactly that. You know, I'm going to poke fun at these people today. But what we rather want is that. And to subscribe to that, I'm going to empty this bottle of milk while I'm talking, because I support the dairy industry. Because it is probably the biggest anomaly that a glass of water, and I'm so glad there's no bottled water in this room, because then I would be really unhappy. But I'm going to take this, and in the Spar at Groenkloof, my son sent me a text message. This costs, I must look, I forgot, 15 rand. 15 rand. 1,500 cents. But do you know that to produce that liter of milk, the cow had to pump 500 liters of blood through an udder. In other words, that is 2.5 44-gallon drums full of blood that had to be pumped through the udder to produce that liter of milk. And then it is a disgrace that in 2016, a bottle of water is more expensive than a liter of milk. So, cheers. So, without further ado, I feel strong now. I had some hormones as well. You know, the other day I was driving down in KZN, and there's a sign next to the N3 that says, "You are now entering hormone-free country." How sad. I can't believe that the sharks are still doing so well in the Karika. Nevertheless. So, just something about, and maybe you've seen this slide, and I think many of the things I'm going to say to you today, you already know, but I just want to emphasize it, and I want you to tell you how I see it as a I don't own any square centimeter of agricultural land. I don't own any ruminant. My wife has 4 Yorkshire Terriers, and that's where it ends. But just coming back to this, it is important on a pasture system that to see that at the maximum profit is at a point where the milk yield per hectare is not the highest, and that the risk, which is the operating profit margin, which is your operating profits divided by the gross income, where the figure is the highest, the risk is the lowest, that also doesn't correlate with milk yield per hectare. And therefore, perhaps this is stockmanship 101 in one slide, because the sweet spot of the business would be there, and that would be how many animals do we keep per hectare, or how do we feed them. And I can't answer that. I can't tell you how much that is exactly. That is a challenge for you to find out to make that business run. This is a slide from one of the slides from the Large Herds Conference. And it says there here that cows per hectare, at this number, we see that the kilogram milk solids per hectare is the highest, and if we go lower, then it is a lower stocking rate is there. But we see that the food, the grass eaten by the cows is very high here, but much lower there. But at the end of the day, we sell milk and we sell or milk solids. And hence this is a loaded slide, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but we have to find that spot where we are sustainable. So the question I ask myself is, what does dairy business sustainability actually mean? And in any dairy business, there's 3 systems. And these are actually transformation systems in the business. And the first is from soil through sun, water, and elements, we grow grass. That is a very important business subsidiary on the land. And the second system is from the grass in a healthy rumen, we produce milk. And the third system is from healthy marketing, which Jude, thank you, this was a great marketing, a piece of marketing work, is that we make money. And it's no disgrace to make money, because we have to keep the wife happy and we have to send the kids to school and everything. And that's very important. So let's look a little bit at healthy soil and how we transform all this with soil to grass, which, by the way, I once asked Trevor Elliott, I don't know if he's in the audience, I said, Trevor, what is your one thing that you consider to be successful? And he says, my cows must eat 80% of what I grow. Simple. So pasture and fertilizer, you know that better than I do. It's important to apply fertilizer when there's moisture and when the temperature is right, and we expect that more or less that kilogram dry matter per kilogram nitrogen applied. And it's also important that we that grass that we produce, that we graze it at the right leaf stage, because then the total pasture biomass is much higher, and then it will lead us to a higher sustainability. And then when we talk about irrigation, we can cry about the cost about the situation with Eskom and the higher input cost for irrigation infrastructure. We actually have very little control over that. But we do have a lot of control of the amount of pasture we grow per unit water deposited. And what struck me, and I never knew it, and I often thought by myself, when walking in a field where it's raining but the sprinklers are on, I think by myself, this guy is fast asleep, he's irrigating while it's raining or shortly after the rain. But if you look at this slide, that one of the enemies of grass yield is to allow the grass plant to go into dormancy or to wilt. And I never realized that if once dormancy or wilting has been triggered above a 35 kilopascal tensiometer reading, then for the next 50 days, even with extra irrigation, you will not pick up that dry matter yield from that pasture. And I have huge respect for you as dairy farmers on pasture, because I think it's an immense art to keep that irrigation going and the grass growing. It is such a fine art, and I marvel at it, simply because I don't understand it, to be quite frank. But it's great to know that if we know that, if we understand it, we can try and prevent it. The key issues on nitrogen fertilization are, if we apply nitrogen to pasture, the pasture will respond, it will grow, and we will rotate, and after the grazing period, during the rest period, we will have regrowth. And what struck me is that if we go beyond the kilogram nitrogen per hectare per day, your annual pasture utilization does not increase. Remember, you must eat what you grow, or the cow must eat what you grow. And the N efficiency, kilogram dry matter per kilogram nitrogen, does not improve. And if we overdo nitrogen, there's a risk of canopy closure, and everybody becomes frantic, and the best is to decrease your nitrogen application. So I'm just going to run quickly to that affects fertility, and I'm going to move straight away to, I would say, that is the nerve center of the cow. It's the ovary. And here is the fallopian tube, and the uterus would be here, and there's always blood there. And if we over-fertilize, and the balance between nitrogen in the diet and carbon in the diet is not what it should be for the microbial population in the cow's rumen, then it's like putting pure two-stroke oil with a little bit of petrol into a two-stroke machine. There will be smoke, lots of it, and you will not start it. And this cow's fertility system is seriously smoking, because she may have been let onto the pasture too soon after fertilization. There is no carbohydrate supplement fed in the stable, and we have a high blood urea, and that urea impairs right through the whole. It increases the risk of non-conception. It impairs the egg maturation of the oocyte. It impairs the transport of that oocyte to be fertilized in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. You get decreased oocyte quality. You get an altered pH in that fallopian tube. And you even get that the poor little sperm that was selected to swim straight emits a mediocre oocyte. And because one sperm plus one egg equals one calf or fetus or embryo, that also doesn't happen. And then we wonder often why the cows are in good condition, but we do 4 AIs per conception. This is another striking thing about pasture, and this is the Staggers Index, and maybe you know it very well. But just the other day I was at a dairy farm, pasture-based, in the Eastern Cape, and this guy was complaining about milk fever in mid-lactation. Doc, please help me quickly. What can I do? Is there something I can inject for this animal, or some miracle thing that we can do? And I said, you know, it's such a deep issue, you cannot solve it with a snap of a finger. But I think what is important is to realize that when we have increased the number of cattle per hectare, the stocking rate, invariably the potassium deposition on that land is going to increase, for sure, because urine and feces is high in that. And this Staggers Index is calculated, that is the denominator, and if you do the sum with a percentage in the dry matter of the pasture, if you go below 1.8, there is a low or no risk of poor magnesium availability. And what is that magnesium availability? magnesium is critically important for the availability of calcium from the bone stores and in the gut. And if that sum gives you more than 2.2, there's a high risk for low magnesium availability from grass. And we have a greater risk of subclinical hypercalcemia. Just now, when I told you about the wonder of the blood flow to make milk, I said to you the heart must pump. If that heart muscle suffers from the slightest, is slightly deprived from calcium, there's just a little bit below what she needs, the stroke volume of the heart will be lower. The cow won't be in a semi-coma and busy dying. It is just that the output, the cardiac output of that animal will be less. And what will then also be lower? The milk yield. And we have a less efficient cow, implying that we're less sustainable. So we need to check the soil. And in the next slide, I'll just show you examples of the potassium is 4, calcium 3, magnesium all the way through the same, and the Staggers index is that. But if we up the calcium, which is one of the denominators, you can't do very much about the magnesium. The farmer that had this problem, he said, no, somebody told me to feed magnesium. You know. But the thing is, it starts in the soil. So I'm not an agronomist, and I'm not a fertilizer specialist. But from this, it is evident that there may be need, especially in a high potassium concentration in your herbage, that there's a need for liming, which will then deal with this and make calcium more available. As a vet, I was told that displaced abomasum is a surgical emergency. It is a very important surgical procedure to do. I was also taught that metritis is a disease, endometritis is a disease. I was also taught that mastitis is a disease. But to be quite frank with you today, and this clever guy already in '96 said, if you have a subclinical hypercalcemia, the cascade effect on so many things is immense. And that's why I say there's only one disease in cattle. There's two: negative energy balance and subclinical hypercalcemia. The others are symptoms of this. And the only two diseases in cattle is that one. So we must look after the soil. We must understand the soil and understand that magnesium, there's so many interactions for the calcium to become available for the smooth muscle function, for passage rate, because if the food doesn't move through, it stays in the gut longer. She's going to eat less. And it's dry matter intake. The harvest combine comes to, she's been working slower today. And the retained placenta and metritis and endometritis, there's many other little factors that come in here. But it's very important to have the calcium status right. And I'm going to say something about negative energy balance also as a primary cause of, a lower dry matter intake. So the healthy rumen then transforms the grass to produce milk or milk solids. I've got some news for you today. Each of you are not farming with cattle. You're not farming with cattle. You're farming with a population of about 4 to 6 kilograms of rumen bacteria that reside in the rumen of that animal. And each of these ruminants that harvest grass to transform into milk for you does that by those rumen microbes. If you remove those rumen microbes, the cow will be dead. So you're actually feeding microbes. And we have the two-stroke mix here, the two-stroke oil and the petrol. And if that is in the right balance, which is that, we actually have the best bypass protein that no feed company can match, and that is microbial protein. So the higher the biomass of this microbial protein is, and the healthier the rumen is, the more, because these bugs don't live forever. Eventually they cling to fiber, and I call it the Titanic effect. They cling to this piece of wood drifting, and eventually it sinks, and it goes through the reticulomasal opening, and it goes to the lower intestinal tract, where these bugs are digested. And the amino acid composition of these bugs is so phenomenal. It is fantastic. So if we feed them right in that ratio, we will have a good microbial protein yield. In the school, they taught us that you must never in agriculture say maximum. You must always say optimum. Not true. You may say maximum microbial yield. You can go for the maximum there because it will help you. And we see here that grazing at the 2.5, 3 leaf stage, that the ratio between total crude protein, which is the nitrogen, and sugar is 1:1. And the reason why this is so important and why you get the best results to graze at that leaf stage is because these little goggles are now happy. They're getting a balanced diet. They're getting the right nitrogen to carbon ratio, which they thrive on, and they grow and exponentially. I just want to say something about habit. Many farmers still have the habit to deworm cattle at dry off. And knowing that the life cycle of the roundworm is 14 to 21 days, and that of liver fluke about 56 days, if we deworm at dry off, by the time she calves, she will have a new infestation. So you could have just as well poured water over that cow. And we have a responsibility towards the consumer to deliver milk that is residue and chemical free. And hence, it is important to recognize that we must do the right thing at the right time. This was done by Andrew Forbes in the Journal of Parasitology. They measured grazing of behavior of cattle that were dewormed at calving versus those that were not dewormed, and they found that the difference was about 54 minutes per day, which is about an hour. If you steal an hour's dry matter in grazing time from a cow per 24-hour cycle, that's pretty hefty. So if we have a slower rumen passage, lower dry matter intake, we aggravate the negative energy balance at calving. And we also have an impaired disease resistance. Because if these cows around calving, some farmer in the Western Cape, by the way, said to me once, calving in a dairy cow is bad. He doesn't like it. He wished the cow could calve only once, and he would do other things, and she has a lactation for a very, very long time, because every time around calving, there's trouble. There's retained placentas, there's mastitis. He hates calving. And the reason is because of the negative energy balance. But I want to introduce to you another important thing, and that is disease resistance, the first line of defense. And here is just a little diagram from Ian Tizard, who's a world-renowned, he's from Texas A&M, world-renowned immunologist. And this is a diagram out of his book. And this is basically a blood vessel where the blood flows in that direction. This is the wall of the blood vessel. We always perceive a blood vessel to be like a polypropylene pipe. You know, it's solid, it can't leak. Not true. The wall of a blood vessel is made up out of cells that interlink. And the beauty of this is that with the blood flow, those cells, the white blood cells, the neutrophils and all those, they roll along. But if there's some inflammatory stimulus, chemical, bacterial, whatever, toxic, these things have the ability to sneak out, and they're actually lured to the battlefield, and they operate brilliantly. But during negative energy balance, when there's a breakdown of body fat, when the cow loses condition after calving, these chaps are not that efficient anymore. They are slow. They're like soldiers that are not fit, and they cannot fight that. And then, if we look at the teat tip, where there's a teat canal, and that is just a window where exactly in the mucosa of the teat system, these things move out, and they fight any ascending infection, and they do that brilliantly. And in a severe negative energy balance, what do we get? Not the disease mastitis, we get the symptom of mastitis. Because mastitis is a symptom of an immune system that is not functioning properly. And that is caused by a too deep negative energy balance. So that is why steaming up cows properly is so utterly important. We also see here, if we look at a scatter plot of the milk protein in a dairy, and we plot that by days in milk, we see that the protein tends to be low in the beginning and tends to rise. And we would like it to be higher there because we want to sell a very good quality product with high protein. But protein is quite fixed. It's not like butterfat with rumen pH that can fluctuate a lot. But that is a symptom of too little energy. The grass, early in the morning, coming out of the dark phase of photosynthesis, that the biology teacher never told me. I had to learn the formula of pyruvic acid and glucose, 6-carbon sugar, off by heart. But it hasn't helped me. But now I understand better. And I understand why you need to know photosynthesis, because it makes starch, but it needs sunlight. So the cow grazing early in the morning on a new pasture, when she wants to graze, that pasture is less palatable, and it is lower, relatively lower in carbon and relatively higher in nitrogen because of the fertilizer. And is that better for the bugs? Is the grass in the morning better for the bugs compared to the grass in the afternoon? So if we move them to a new pasture, why don't we do that in the afternoon once they gewillig is om te by, and we focus on the bugs? And when we give supplementary feed in the stable, why not give more in the morning to supplement the low carbohydrates in the pasture in the morning, and give little, if any, in the afternoon, or split it 60-40? So the reproduction efficacy, and here we come back to the parasites, and this is a New Zealand publication. Improvement in reproductive performance, although not significant, were observed on eprinomectin-treated cattle in terms of fewer matings per conception, shorter calving to conception interval, higher pregnancy rate at first insemination. There was also a significant effect on milk yield. The results suggest that treatment of dairy cattle at calving, and that's not only for roundworm, the same holds true for liver flu, but any liver fluke treatment, there's no long-acting liver fluke remedy on this market. You treat them today. If they pick up the miracidium tomorrow, they will be infected again. So treat the cows for liver fluke at the onset of steam up, because triclophenazole has a 14-day milk withdrawal, and you will have very little liver fluke infestation at the time of calving, when the negative energy balance is at its deepest. Stop deworming cattle at dry-off. Even if it's a habit, we have to turn around. Because we see that negative energy balance has a huge knock-on effect in health in cattle. We also see that negative energy balance has an effect on the quality of the oocyte. And if this is the timeline, and the cow is calved here, around calving more or less, the primordial follicle emerges, and it will ovulate at about 90 days in milk, when more or less on pasture we want that cow to be already pregnant. So if it was an excessive negative energy balance there, the quality of the oocyte will be bad there. It's like a conveyor belt. That oocyte in the follicle is put on there. It's subjected to bad conditions, non-esterite fatty acids and everything. And by the time it's ovulated, it's still of a bad quality, inferior quality. And together with some heat stress, that embryo doesn't survive, and we have early embryonal death. And your vet will be able to tell you, and you can also say, how many, what do we lose? What is our early embryonal losses in the herd? So, how to achieve 40% conception at a 21-day pregnancy rate? That's after the voluntary waiting period. The first 21 days we want to achieve at least more than 40. To achieve fewer days open in cows and a lower cost of pregnancy in heifers. What is the value of one open day on pasture? Next question, what is the value of 1 kilogram of dry matter grazing? And I had a guy from the US, he qualified in Wisconsin under Milo World Bank. The last 2 weeks he said to me, Willem, he says to the farmers, what is rule number 1 to get cows pregnant? He asked the farmers, and the guy said, no, cow must in estrus, she mustn't, rising plane of condition, and he says, you know what, it's very simple. Get the semen into the cow. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, if she doesn't conceive, refer to rule number 1. And I like simple things like that. So he says, aggressively inseminate cows at the end of the voluntary waiting period, increase the fertility to first AI, identify non-pregnant cows and aggressively re-inseminate them, and increase the fertility to the first, second, and perhaps later AIs. And this paper by Scott McDougall from New Zealand on pasture found that the prevalence of anovulation, in other words, cows that are not cycling at the time that when the voluntary waiting period is open, runs at about 25%. And it's very much the same at Team R herds. So what do we do with them? Does that 25% of the herd dictate operations of the other 75? And the thing is, if we look at, again, and I haven't got the graph here, but Nigel, you may, and everybody may have seen it. If the milk production was low in 1960, and today it's much higher, usually there's an inverse fertility. And the reason for that is simple. It is blood flow through the udder, which also has to flow to the liver, And in the liver, we have an increased metabolism of ovarian steroids. And with lower estrogens in the cow, because the liver metabolizes it, and with lower progesterone, there's a risk of subfertility. We see a lower expression of estrus. There's programs available today where we can, at a low body condition score, but rising, if we had control animals, we would have 15% pregnancy with aided progesterone devices and a timed AI program, we can get 38, and with an emphasis of PMSG or ECG, which is critical. And at a body condition score that's higher, we don't see the effect of ECG, and that is for follicular growth. Similarly, days in milk, to help the follicle grow with ECG gives a significant effect if we inseminate shorter than 70 days in milk, as opposed to more than 70 days in milk. This is just a financial analysis by Albert de Vries. I'm told that this guy doesn't know the front and the end of a cow, but he knows the front and the flip sides of a dollar very well. And he says that days open in the herds where there's estrus detection compared to timed AI, with a 40% conception rate, we see that the value of the days open decrease. The value per breeding decreases. The value of culling decreases. The total value is lower. And the percentage pregnant at 270 days is about the same, but the cost per pregnancy is much lower if we apply timed AI. And the bottom line is days open are expensive. The last system in the business is healthy marketing of milk to make money and increase the demand for milk. Now, the kilogram milk consumption, I went to the web, I couldn't find later numbers, but in South Africa, it seems that in 2007, it was 57 liters per head per year, and in 2016, it had increased to 58. In Namibia, it's 77. In Botswana, it's 88. In New Zealand, it's 100. In Kenya, it's 120. And my bosses always tell me, Willem, Turkey has the same number of dairy cows in milk. Same number. Same number of beef cattle, and almost the same number of sheep. And they always say to me, you know what, Willem, we want you to aspire to the Turkey performance. And there we see they drink 138 liters of milk. In Australia, Finland is the highest. I don't know if I'm talking out of turn, but let me take a swig of milk first. So I'm contributing to improve that number. It's nice. What I'm saying is that, can we do a lot about the milk price? Can we really? We can't do very much. But there's one thing we can do, and that's increase the per capita consumption of milk, that the demand must be, people must crave about this product. You know, I watched the Comrades marathon. I don't know if you know what that is, Jude. It's people running from Pietermaritzburg to Durban, 90-kilometer world-renowned race. And guess who was the sponsor? Floro Margarine. You know, Tim Noakes was livid, I think. But why not butter? Why was butter bad-mouthed? I can remember as a kid, my mother had wholesome white margarine. There wasn't yellow margarine. And then came the story and the lie that butter gives you a heart attack, and that and I'm frank, and they can throw me in jail if they want. But that was to sell the yellow margarine. For sure. That's my opinion. I'm a consumer. This drink has the best ratio of sodium and potassium. It's the best rehydration drink ever. There should be a stand and milking points at the Comrades Marathon, for sure. Not this Coca-Cola. Sorry, I've stopped drinking Cola. But it is so critical that the consumer gets the truth. And in milk is the most beautiful molecule in the fat, conjugated linoleic acid. And in milk there's about 83 milligrams per 100 ml. So I've drunk 250. I'm nearly finished with that liter. And the wonder of this, it has anti-neoplastic properties. It's abundant in milk, not in Coke, not in fluoro, very little maybe. And in a book called Recent Advances in Animal Nutrition in 2001, that's 1.5 decades ago, 1.5 decades ago, Dale Bauman from Cornell University published a paper, Conjugated Linoleic Acid and the Dairy Cow. And in it, it's too good to be true, but it is true. It has anti-carcinogenic properties. It has anti-atherogenic, gewrigsontsteking, anti-diabetic. It gives you altered nutrient partitioning and metabolism, more about that. It is an immune modulator, and it gives improved bone mineralization. Guys, I'm going to poke fun now. Allow me, I'm going to go wild now. I get an email. Listen carefully. I get an email from my dermatologist. Dear Dr. Schultheiss, you must come in urgently to our clinic. I smell a dead rat. Yes, but my daughter was there to have a mushi removed. The email, it's a long email. It's not good marketing because it's too much reading, but I was interested, I was inquisitive. She says there's an increase because people sit more in offices and are not in the sun anymore, so they don't get sufficient vitamin D. They want to do a vitamin D analysis on me, and they see women getting osteoporosis more and more, and it's because now the sun gets blamed for it. You know, and they want to make money doing a vitamin D test because you surely wouldn't do it for free, and they will sell you vitamin D tablets. And I think by myself that full cream, unadulterated milk, as it comes out of the cow, has cream in it. And vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and milk has vitamin D for sure. And if you drink abundantly of this, like I'm doing now, you don't need to pop CLA pills, and you don't need to pop vitamin D pills. For sure. Tell me if I'm out of the park. And there is the CLA concentration, and the guys on pasture, the higher the pasture concentration in the diet is, the higher the CLA is. So 200 milligrams in milk, it's 1 cup of milk. I've got a lot. I've did 4, so that's 8. It's nearly a gram. I'm healthy and strong. And that's the message we need. You know, and then we look at the CLA content in foods, and we see that the milk products are all relatively high. But what is wonderful is that if you do an ultra-high temperature processing of milk for long-life milk, it doesn't affect that molecule. And if you make cheese, it doesn't affect it. And if you make yogurt, it doesn't affect it. So I eat full cream, double cream, Greek-style yogurt nowadays. This was an advert in an Afrikaans magazine, Disari. And they were advertising tonalin with conjugated linoleic acid because it has a nutrient partitioning, and there's papers on it. I mean, women can, Jude, you must drink milk. Woman, you must drink milk. It's not only for bone strength. And there is, you buy these pills and you think you're going to get there. And so I just phoned my son, because this is an old slide. I once did this for the vets. I tried them to drink more milk. But milk is now, for a glass, it's $3.75. So it's not $2, it's $3.75 what I've been drinking there. And that pill is $1.89. But you know, if you're popping CLA pills, a 500 milligram capsule, you don't get calcium, you don't get protein, you don't get sodium, you don't get the essential minerals that you lose in sweat. Guys, milk is beautiful. It's the best. If a calf has diarrhea, don't stop giving it milk. Just replenish the minerals it loses through the diarrhea. Don't give it all sorts of sugary stuff. It will interfere with the clot in the abomasum of that calf. You will aggravate the situation. And with that, I thank you for your attention and the stage, and to talk to these wonderful people that make the country run.